following announcement has been paid for by the WZWA Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Insider's Edge podcast here on the WZWA Network. I'm your host with the most on the West Coast, Karlifornia in Fury. It is a joy to be with you all once again. And speaking of a joy, right here, right now, I get to have a conversation with somebody that I remember seeing on this documentary when I was about 12 years old with my friends. And at the time, you know, living in Australia, it's very hard to find out information on certain things at the time because we weren't very savvy with the internet. So for quite some time, we had no idea what happened to this man and another guy that was on that documentary. But of course, all these years later, I've done my research. I know all about this guy, and I'm so excited to learn about his time in pro wrestling. Ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only, the incomparable, Mr. Tony Jones. How are you, sir?
No, that's great. Thank you so much. I guess you could have threw Shooter in there. But you know, that was a great introduction. Thank you, man.
No problem, sir. So great to have the chance to talk to you. First question usually is how you became a pro wrestling fan, but I wanted to kind of ask it in a different way. Firstly, were you a pro wrestling fan, or did you get into amateur wrestling first?
I was a pro wrestler first. Now, I'm sorry, it's a little hot where I am. I have this fan that keeps shutting off like every, I don't know, 10 minutes or so. So I'm just tapping it. Okay. So if you see me doing that, I'm sorry.
That's
cool.
So,
yeah. So I was a pro wrestling fan first. Some of my early memories were my mother and my father taking me to the Cow Palace to see Ray Stevens and Pat Patterson. And I think it was Roy Shire. I think it was that was the promoter at the time. It was before Vern Gagne took over the Cow Palace. One of the first matches I think I remember, and I remember talking to Dave Meltzer about this, and Dave, I mean, when I brought this up, Dave knew exactly what I was talking about, and he was the only guy I'd ever said this to in my entire life, and he was like, oh yeah, that was like 1979 or something like, I can't remember the year, but he told me the year it was, and he remembered everything. I'm like, oh, was that it, Dave? But I remember Dusty Rhodes against Pat Patterson, and I believe that was the match, and it was like for the United States Championship. Pat Patterson was the heel, and he hits Dusty. Dusty goes out into the floor. He goes out into the floor, hits Dusty with a chair. Dusty goes down. All of a sudden, Dusty gets up, blood all over the place. I remember sitting probably like second or third row with my parents, and I mean, I could just see the blood dripping off his forehead. And Dusty climbs up onto the apron, and Patterson just comes over and kicks him on the forehead. He goes down, and I'm like, oh, this looks so brutal. And Dusty gets back in the ring, and Pat Patterson starts hitting on the cut, and Dusty starts shaking and starts fighting back. And all of a sudden, you know, Pat Patterson's afraid of him, and Dusty bumps him and bumps him and bumps him. And now Dusty's mad and hits him with the bionic elbow. Pat Patterson scoots, and I was hooked. That was it. I think that's my earliest memory. I love the idea of the guy just getting beaten up. All of a sudden he just comes back. One of my favorite movies is Rocky, you know, so I think the whole concept of, you know, the bad guy beating on the good guy coming back. Later, I learned to appreciate the bad guy, you know, more and stuff like that. But, you know, I think that's what kind of hooked me, you know, just like all the kids, you know, you like the superheroes and things like that. And that's kind of like what hooked me into pro wrestling. And, to kind of follow up on your question, when I got into high school, I wasn't really an athlete. I was pretty much like a homebody. You know, I just pretty much stayed at home, watched television, did things like that. Go outside every now and then, play with my friends. But when I got into high school, I joined the wrestling team because it had the word wrestling in it. And, you know, it wasn't the same as pro wrestling, and I knew that, but it was still wrestling. You know, so the only reason I joined amateur wrestling was because it was wrestling, which was, you know, some form of pro wrestling. So, yeah, that's how I got into amateur wrestling. It was because of pro wrestling.
Right, cool. It's so funny the amount of people I've interviewed on this show, and Dusty Rhodes' name always gets brought up when they got hooked, either watching him on TV or watching him perform locally. It's just uncanny to me how many people bring up that man's name. But I
It
do
was,
want
it
to
was,
ask,
it was, it was. Let me just say, you know, because Dusty
yeah.
was such a huge influence early in my life. It was the charisma, really what it was. You know, it was the charisma. I mean, Hulk Hogan had charisma too, and you know he had that fire and everything. But you know, Dusty, you know, looking like the common man, you know, you just kind of got behind him more. I think, you know, I really thought about, you know, I've thought about the wrestling business, and I've thought about, you know, what actually hooks people and what really gets these guys over. And I think it was, you know, the way Dusty looked and all this kind of stuff. He looked like the common guy. He looked like a regular guy out there. So I think you got behind him. Whereas Hulk Hogan, you know, he's larger than life. He's a big guy. You know, you expect him to kind of, you know, fight back. But Dusty, I think you got behind him more. So I think that was the appeal of, you know, Dusty, and you know, the gimmick, the American Dream. And so yeah, I've thought about that a lot. So I just wanted to kind of tell you, I think that's why people have Dusty as a heavy influence, my opinion.
Yeah, and I can say that because, you know, it's not like Dusty had a like a 4 or 5 year long title reign where he was always winning, whereas Hogan always won every single time. So I think people, you know, you get behind that underdog. So I can totally understand that. So amateur wrestling, okay, you got into it because the word wrestling was in it. I watched this thing with Kurt Angle. He was talking to Chad Gable and Otis on a WWE table for 3, and they were talking about when they first started, and Otis didn't realize that it was actual proper wrestling. And in his first match, he punched the guy in the face. For you, how did you take to amateur wrestling? You know, you signed up because the word wrestling was in it, but did you know what you were getting into when you started getting into it, and how long into it did you realize that you're actually starting to get quite good at this?
So I'm just gonna give you a real, you know, quick story. It's a story that I'm gonna probably end up putting like in a book or something, like a, you know, a self-help book kind of a thing. But my story basically goes, I went to Reardon High School, you know, in San Francisco. And when I joined the wrestling team as a freshman, I had never at that point done a sport, you know, in my life. And I'd never really, like, you know, got with the guys and played, you know, tackle football, or, you know, played, you know, football, basketball, baseball, any of those kind of sports, got the guys getting together at the park, you know, stuff like that, right? I never really was into that. Always like music, movies, television, wrestling, things that were like, you know, on television at home. So I did a lot of that, right? So now I'm in high school, and now I'm with guys who had been doing most of that kind of stuff most of their lives. So I joined the wrestling team, and I literally lost every single match. Every single match I was pinned. I didn't just lose, you know, by points, because in amateur wrestling, you lose by points, you can lose by pin, you can lose by technical pin. You know, I lost by pinfall. Every single match my freshman year, the guy held me down and I couldn't get up. And I remember I went to my mother and I told my mother, I can't do this no more. I'm embarrassed. I keep getting beat. You know, help me quit, right? Because I don't want to sound like a quitter. So my coach calls the house, and I talked to my mother about talking to him and telling him to quit for me. So she said, I'd rather Tony not wrestle anymore. You know, I got some things for him to do, and I don't want his grace to slip. So I'd rather him not wrestle anymore. And this coach, his name was Steve Swanson. He said, no, I'm not going to let you quit for Tony. Tony is weak, and we're going to toughen him up. Now, if Tony quits, then I'll let him quit, but I'm not going to let you quit for him. And my mother said, he won't let me quit for you. So I remember getting really upset and training really hard the summer, and I came back and joined the junior varsity team, and I think I got like a 500 record. I did really well. I came back into varsity and I did very well. I became like, you know, one of the top guys on the team. And, you know, and then my senior year, you know, I was the league champion and sections, you know, winner, and kind of, you know, my career kind of took off after that wrestling coach said, no, I'm not going to let him quit, you know? So yeah, that's kind of like my story. I kind of went in and got humiliated and didn't like it and came back from it. So yeah, that's how it kind of went for me.
Ah, that's excellent. Very, very, very inspiring stuff. I love hearing stuff like that. So that's really cool. Thank you for indulging me in that. I wanted to ask, okay, as time wears on in your amateur career, what leads you to deciding to get into pro wrestling, and how was training under Mike Modest?
So when I was wrestling at San Francisco State, I ended up, going to college wrestling at San Francisco State. And while I was wrestling there, I was working at a video store called Captain Video. And this guy, I used to always play, we're supposed to play new release titles and things like that to kind of promote the movies that we're renting. But I would always put up wrestling because I wanted to watch wrestling, and it was kind of against store policy, but I was the manager and I kind of just did what I wanted. So I'd always have wrestling up on the screen, right? And the customers would come in and they'd laugh at me for watching it. And this one guy comes in and he looks at it and he was like, "Oh, you like wrestling?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "You ever thought about being a pro wrestler?" And I said, "No, not really." And he said, "Do you play a sport?" And I said, "No, I wrestle at San Francisco State." And he said, "Well, when you're done wrestling at State, talk to me." So the guy continued to come into the store over the next couple of years. And then I told him one day, I said, "Yeah, I finished wrestling at San Francisco State." So he told me, he goes, "Yeah, I'd like to introduce you to a guy that I know. His name's Roland Alexander." And I said, "Oh, what's he about?" And he said, "Well, he owns a wrestling school out in Hayward. And, I'd like to take you out there. Maybe you can talk to him and see how it goes." So I went out and met Roland and told him I'd been a wrestling fan my whole life. I'd wrestled at San Francisco State and everything. And Roland's face, I remember Roland's face really lighting up, right? And and I give Roland all the credit in the world. Right off the bat, Roland goes, "This is going to be great. You're going to be our shooter." And I said, "Oh, what's that mean?" And he said, "You're the shooter. You're going to be the one. You're the real amateur wrestler. You're our real wrestler." And I said, "Oh, you don't have real wrestlers here?" And he goes, "Oh, we got a lot of tough guys here. We have a lot of real tough, strong guys, but we don't have any like amateur wrestlers, not with your credentials. You're going to be our shooter." And I said, "Oh, okay." He goes, "Shooter Tony Jones." He goes, "That's who you're going to be. We're going to use your real name because when they look you up, we want them to say, 'Oh, wow, he really did wrestle at San Francisco State.' It's going to bring credibility to our company." And I remember Roland was just I didn't even take my first bump yet. And Roland had my gimmick and what he wanted to do with me. And I remember when my very first time, he said, "Why don't you come to the training session, meet some of the guys?" And I remember I came to one of the training sessions. And when I came to the training session, like the guys were coming up to me one by one and they're like, "Oh, you're the amateur wrestler, huh?" So that's kind of like, that's how I kind of got into pro wrestling. You said trained under Mike Modest, I really never really trained under Mike, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Kind of people, Mike did train a lot of the guys, and Mike is a damn good trainer, but no, I never trained under Mike. When I came into APW, I trained under Matt Hyson, Spike Dudley.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay. So, guys in my class were Donovan Morgan, Vicious Vic Grimes. We had a lot of good guys in our group. Those are probably some of the guys you may be more familiar with. Donovan Morgan, Donovan had done a lot of stuff. He's not really on the scene as much. Vic did some stuff with ECW and New Jack, so he's a little bit, more popular. But Donovan had his little stint with Ring of Honor, and he's done some TNA stuff. So he's a real solid worker as well. So he was in my class as well. After my first class, that's when Crash Holly came in. Mike Lockwood, he came into APW, but he was already trained. He had gone to Woody Farmer's school. And so he came in and Roland was like, "Hey, you probably have a lot of bad habits because you weren't trained right." Because Roland always thought, and to a degree, I think Roland was right, now that I look back on it, right? Roland always thought, like, if you didn't train at APW, you weren't really trained right. And to a degree, I kind of feel like that was somewhat true in a way, just because I've been to a lot of places and a lot of guys had fundamental problems. So, and our guys were really solid when it came to that kind of stuff, fundamentals. A lot of times we lacked in, some of the guys didn't have bodies and, things like that. But our guys could work, and I talked to Mike about that. We really had a solid crew, and APW today, they still run today, and those guys are solid, man. It's like, it's really, really a testament. And I'm gonna go off course just for a second, because I do want to get this in.
Sure.
This guy, Marcus Mack, he's running APW right now, and he's super, super, super cool guy. I totally support everything he's doing. When Roland was sick, I remember talking to Roland, and Roland told me one of his fears was that APW was going to die when he died. So I give Marcus all the kudos in the world, because he was kind of like, he was right there with Roland and everything. It was like, it's kind of like, his right hand man kind of thing. And Marcus took that and kind of took APW in a different direction, kind of made it almost like bigger, in a lot of ways. I mean, he got in front of a different audience, right? And he got in front of the Cow Palace. We were never able to get into the Cow Palace. That was big. And I'm happy to be a part of that, because for me, I came full circle. I literally called Marcus, because at that point I'd been retired, and APW was going to do a show in the Cow Palace. And I literally begged Marcus, and I have no shame in saying that. I literally begged Marcus. I said, brother, I've been retired for a long time, and I don't want to take the spot from any guy who's coming up, but please, as a favor, just put me on the show so I can wrestle in front of my mother, to be a personal favorite, because, my earliest memories were going to wrestling with her and my dad, right? So that would be great for me. So, thank you, Marcus, for making that happen, right? So, yeah, APW is super solid. All our guys were just fundamentally sound, man. I mean, our stuff is on YouTube and stuff, and if you check it out, I mean, we were really like ECW. When I look back on it, that's kind of like what we were like. We had a little bit of everything going on. We had the workers, we had the high flyers, we had the hardcore guys. Yeah, no, APW was solid, and yeah.
Awesome, bro.
I kind of went off course there, but it's like, yeah.
That's totally fine, bro. There was some real interesting stuff there, and I was going to ask you a little bit later on about the fact that you got to work a couple. I think it was a couple of battle royals there at the Cow Palace for APW. So that's really cool that you got to come full circle with your wrestling career there. And thank you for correcting me on the Mike Modest training you thing. This is the problem with the internet, bro. The internet is just
no. I do not want to take credit away from Mike, right?
Of course.
Now, Mike did have a hand in my training, okay? And a lot of times people do think Mike and I were kind of like neck and neck in our careers and things like that. And I do want to get this out there and get it straight. Mike was way ahead of me, right? Mike was a veteran when I came in.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. I can't remember how many years, or I don't know how many years. I think Mike might have been 4 or 5. I think Mike started doing this in high school. So, when I was wrestling in high school, amateur, Mike was already a pro wrestler with Jerry Monty doing stuff like that. So Mike did have a hand in my training, because a lot of times he'd come in and, he'd take over class, or, for this class, Matt Heison's not available, so Mike Modest is going to take over. So yeah, I don't want to take credit away from Mike, because Mike, because Mike is a good trainer, and he did have a hand in my training, But as far as like who I really say was my main trainer, I say it was Matt Heisen.
Cool, excellent.
Yeah.
The debut match, you go through training. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, because the internet can be incorrect, but I believe January 15th, 1997 against Manny the Raging Bull Fernandez at APW Gym Wars. Is that correct?
No. My very first pro match was against a guy named El Chicano Flame, who was one of my best friends, one of my dearest friends, one of my best friends in the wrestling business. You can't say, I don't know anybody who doesn't like El Chicano Flame. And I think he's still working. So bless his heart. But at the time, I'm a new guy coming in, and Roland wanted me to kind of go over. So and he was getting pushed as El Chicano Flame. So I remember we did a little thing where he wrestled me without the mask, which is an old school thing, right? He wrestled me without the mask so that when he gets beat, nobody knows who he is, right? So he was my first pro match, and that was at Gym Wars. I think I had another match against a guy named Jason Clay, who was just, fantastic. Then I wrestled Manny, and I believe that was at Terra Nova High School. And I remember being in awe of that experience, because I've been a wrestling fan my whole life, and this is the Raging Bull, Manny Fernandez, and the way I remember him was, Dusty Rhodes and Manny Fernandez, the NWA World Tag Team Champions, and they were battling the Russians, Ivan and Nikita Koloff. And, he's badass. And I remember when I was a kid, I was at Civic Auditorium with my mother watching NWA wrestling, and it was Manny Fernandez, Rick Rude against the Road Warriors for the NWA World Tag Team Championship. And Manny and Rude were the champions, and some fan screams at Manny. Manny jumps off the apron, goes over to the barricade. The guy spits. I mean, you can see it. You know, we're all sitting, you know, rows back, and you can see it. The guy spits a loogie right in Manny's face. Manny jumps the barricade, hits the guy in the face. The guy goes down. Security jumps into the whole thing, grabs Manny, grabs the guy. Also, Manny pushes security out of the way, jumps over the barricade, jumps up on the ring apron, and then gets tagged in. And I just remember, what a badass. and I was like, okay, so I got to wrestle this guy. So, but it was great. You know, Manny led me through the whole thing. And I remember at the end of the match, he told Roland, he goes, "Where'd you find this kid? He sucks." And Roland said, "I'm standing right there." Right. And Roland was like, "Really? Tony sucks?" And he said, "Yeah. Oh, he didn't do this and he didn't do that. And I took him up for a suplex and he went over too fast. And I mean, the kid sucks." And Roland was like, "Oh, what is this, Tony? Your second or third match?" And I said, "It's my third match." And Manny looks at me and he goes, "Your third match?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh, then you're good." He goes, "For your third match," he goes, that's not bad. So I remember, so that was my experience with Manny, my third match. Yeah.
Excellent stuff. I want to ask a little bit about Roland. Many out there will remember Roland from being on the Beyond the Mat documentary, and fans of APWs obviously would be very, he's well known to them as well. But I want to know what it was like working for him.
That's a very good. That's the way you kind of presented that. That was kind of good. What was it like working for him? It was great working for him because we had great opportunity, and Roland knew how to put these matches together. Roland knew how to put on a show. It was exciting whenever we did a APW show, something we all looked forward to. We trusted Roland. It was a Paul Heyman kind of a thing where, you know, he led the guys. We all didn't make any money, but we were out there busting our ass and risking our necks, you know, for this dream and for passion. And Roland's like, you know, he's right there. He's the conductor, right? And so working for Roland, I guess I could say it was great. The pay from Roland wasn't great, right? But but at the same time, a lot of us were still new to the business and things like that. And in the early stages, Roland wasn't making a lot of money, But as time went on, the show started getting bigger, and we really started to draw, and Roland was really charging a lot, and not charging a lot, I shouldn't say, but Roland was making a lot, right? I mean, Roland was very fair in what he was charging. So I think the guys, the fans were literally, I think they were getting a steal, if you really want to know the truth. For the kind of action they were getting for what they were paying, they were lucky. So, but Roland was still making money, So when he was making the money, I thought he could have spread it a little bit more evenly. And that's kind of like what I was saying in Beyond the Mat, right? Is that, he would sit there and say, well, I'm not going to pay you this much because, you didn't have a good match, or, oh, you've only had this amount of time in the ring or whatever. Now that is how the wrestling business is, and I've talked to other guys, and other guys, they wrestled for free, and, I wrestled for free my first match, and it's like, you do things to start out, and that's how it is everywhere. You talk to rock musicians and they're going to tell you they played gigs for free, just so they can get their name out there, just so they can get the exposure, right? So, I do understand how it works, but, when the movie came out, Barry asked the question, and and everybody always loved that, that scene where Roland and I are kind of going back and forth, and Barry, of course, I took broadcasting and video editing, and that's what I studied in school. So, really they told a story where they put Roland and I against each other, and bam, 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 right? So, and it was entertaining, and it was great, and Roland told me, Tony, you know what? That whole thing was the best thing that ever happened to me. My APW boot camp skyrocketed. He said, beyond, it was great. And he said, and the fact that you and I kind of went back and forth gave me more exposure, made me more unlikable. He said it, so we ended up laughing about it years later, but yeah, it was all great stuff.
Definitely, very, and I'm almost there to talk a little bit about it. But I do like the way that they kind of depicted him in the documentary, and I always thought to myself, I reckon he's a pretty cool guy. Wrestling.
Roland did go out there and he did, say a lot of things about a lot of people. So he did, Roland did earn his, Roland did earn his stripes. Okay. So, and I went to other companies and they were like, oh, he's this and he's that. And I'm like, yeah, Roland would stay up late at night and just sandbag, other promoters, and, oh, your guys suck. And, I heard you guys did a show last night and you guys couldn't hold a candle to APW. And, our guy, my worst guy is better than your top guy. And Roland would just do that to everybody. And looking back on it, he really was doing it to make his product better, right? Hey, we're the best. You don't have to say you guys suck, we're the best. You can just say we're the best, right? You don't have to say you suck, right? But Roland would say you suck and we're the best. So he didn't make a lot of friends. So, so the image of Roland in the movie, is somewhat earnable, because Roland embraced being that guy. He didn't have a problem going out there being disliked. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's very cool stuff. Okay, independent wrestling in the late 90s, having a job as well. How hard was it to juggle those two and get by?
I didn't really have much of a problem with it. I had a pretty flexible schedule out there. When Beyond the Mat came out, in the scene, I talk about working at Visa. And when at that time, I was working at Visa and I was working the graveyard shift, which was perfect for me because at the time, I'm training to be a pro wrestler. So, training was like 7 to 10. My shift started at I think 11. So, I trained until 10 o'clock. And then I just jump in my car, drive right over the bridge, go straight, first exit off the bridge was work. So I think it was like a 15-minute ride, 11 o'clock at night, no traffic. So I could pretty much from APW be at work in about 15, 20 minutes tops in my wrestling, not my wrestling gear, but my sweats, right? Yeah. And then I walk in, there's nobody there. It's 11 o'clock at night, it's graveyard, there's nobody working. So I just walk in my sweats, I do my job, for like an hour in my sweats. And then once I'm, kind of complacent and I got most of my job kind of complete right now I can just go take a shower because they had a shower on site, right?
Oh, cool.
So now I can go take a shower, change my clothes, right? So for me, everything was like clockwork. I remember doing WWE one time and I had to do 2 shots. One was in San Jose on Monday. I think it was before Monday Night Raw. And then the next was UC Davis. Yeah, over near UC Davis on Tuesday for, I think their Sunday Night Heat. Not the Sunday Night Heat, but one of their one of their shows that they were doing at the time, but it was on, I don't think it was SmackDown. SmackDown, I don't think
probably
was really around.
Velocity.
Maybe Velocity. It was one of their shows with, they were always doing Monday, Tuesdays, right? So they did the Tuesday. And when I did UC Davis, and I remember what I had to do was I had to do the Monday Night Raw show. And I remember just sitting there, because you don't want to leave early, right? Because, especially, you're one of the dark match guys, right? So you sit around and you wait until the very end. And when you see people leaving, that's when you leave. Because I don't want to be just leaving too early. So I waited. It was like 10, 10:30. It's like 10:45. I got to be working at 11. I'm in San Jose. And I have to drive all the way, over to San Mateo, which is about, an hour, 45 minutes. And I remember just waiting. And all of a sudden everybody was getting ready to leave. I saw Vince get ready to leave and then I left. And those times where I remember juggling being a pro wrestler and still running to work. And so for me, I always made it happen. I always had good jobs. So I didn't want to lose my job. I didn't want to quit my job. There was only one time in my career where it was really necessary for me to quit my job because of pro wrestling. We can talk about that later, but
yeah.
But yeah, it was no problem for me to manage both. I don't know a lot of guys that were doing a lot of like jobs like, you know, like I was doing. Like my job was like a career type job, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot of guys. You know, we had a couple of guys, you know, guy who was, you know, firemen. We had guys that were, you know, a police officer, you know, a guy who worked for United Airlines, you know, things like that. But a lot of the other guys, you know, they were kind of like doing, you know, jobs here, jobs there. So, you know, being a pro wrestler mainly full time. So, you know.
Right. Okay. Barry Blaustein contacts you for Beyond the Mat. How did that come about? And what did you think it was going to be initially going into this documentary?
I knew that a director was going to come to APW because he was working on some documentary. It didn't seem like a big deal to me. Modest and some of the guys had already done a TV show, Secrets of Pro Wrestling Exposed, or something like that, right? You know, where they kind of like show like, you know, you think the guy is coming off the top rope with a fist to the forehead, but wait until you see how he really lands. You know, that kind of, you know, it was that kind of thing, right? So, so they had done that. So when Beyond the Mat had come around, it was just like another thing, right? So we didn't think it was going to be like a big movie or, you know, a big time director or anything like that, right? So Barry Blaustein comes around, he talks to some of the guys, and I do remember him coming up to me later in the process. He just kind of talked to all the guys, and he left, and he came back, he talked to some of the guys, and he left. And I never really heard anything. It's not like Roland came to me, nobody said anything to me. And Barry, one day when he was there checking out the guys to see, you know, how we wrestled, and just, you know, I think he came and took some footage, just some rough cuts and things like that. And he took me aside and he said, you know, I want to put you in the movie. I want to focus you in the movie. And I said, oh, I said, you know, that'd be great. I said, you know, I've only been in the business a short amount of time. And he said, yeah, that's what Roland told me. And he said that, you know, you wrestled in college, and, you know, you have a college education and you have a job. And, you know, I just kind of wanted to see from your perspective, why are you in this business? He said, you know, you wrestled amateur, you have a college education, you can do other things. Why are you here? And I kind of want to tell that side of the story. So I need to talk to some of the other guys, and we're going to be telling other stories. But that's kind of like what I'm looking at with you. He said, you know, when I talk to you, he said, you just sound a little different than some of the other guys. So I just kind of want to exploit that a little. And, you know, and I said, oh, okay, you know, but as far as I knew at the time, it sounded to me like, you know, he was going to grab like a bunch of guys, right? Like, you know, so I thought it was going to be a bunch of us, right? And then it later turned out to be really focused on, the next step was that it was focused to be on myself, Mike Modest, and another guy that we had named Gigolo Steve Rosano. He had done a lot of stuff with XPW. Steve, you know, really, really good worker, did a gimmick called the Gigolo. And I remember when I came into APW, he used to come up with Rico Suave, and he used to do this just annoying dance to that. I mean, you got to hate anybody who comes out to that song, right? and he would do this annoying dance, and he had this little tiny vest on. And I mean, when I saw him, I came to an APW show. Roland was like, come to one of our shows and see what we do. And I said, okay. So I remember Steve, that song hits, I see the smoke, Steve comes out, he does his dance. And when he gets in the ring and he takes his sunglasses off, and the babyface starts stepping towards him, and he's like, no, get him back. And when he starts doing that, I'm like, oh my God, this guy's like a real pro wrestler. It's like, this is what I've been watching, you know? So I remember Steve, you know, really, really, you know, putting on a good show. And Modest came out, you know, and, you know, I remember thinking like, wow, he's like a Ray Stevens type. So I remember Steve Rosano and Mike Modest impressing me most when I came to APW. So it was very cool to me that it was those two guys and myself that were going to be featured in Beyond the Mat. And then Steve had a little bit of a falling. I know to this day, I know he's kicking himself for this, but he had a little bit of a falling out with Roland. Sometime after that, I don't know if Steve and I are good friends, and he used to work at his side job was that he was working at 24 Hour Fitness near my house. And I used to go there to work out, and I'd go there, work out, we talk, and I remember, he knew that it was coming, that Beyond the Mat was coming, but nobody knew how big it was going to be. And he didn't know if he was really going to be in it, but yeah, he had a falling out with Roland. I think he left, and Beyond the Mat kind of came and went, and I don't know if Barry really had Steve in mind by the time the movie was really in production.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did hear in the very beginning, early stages, that it was supposed to be Rosano, Modest, and me. But then somehow, with Rosano having the falling out and all this kind of stuff, I think it just became Modest and myself.
Wow.
That's my perspective. If you talk to Modest might have a little bit of a different perspective, right? As a matter of fact, I know he'll have a different perspective because, Modest was closer to Roland. So much closer, right? So I'm sure Modest heard pretty much what Roland heard, whereas I just kind of heard, I just heard directly from Barry, and that was it. Modest heard from Barry, Modest heard from Roland, so Modest was plugged in. So, he may hear, he may have a different perspective, but that's my perspective from what I was told by Barry.
Right. Interesting stuff. I'm learning things here. This is really cool. Okay. I talked to Mike about this. I got his side of the story. Looking forward to seeing your perspective. September 15th. Yeah, once I give you
my perspective, I want you to tell me Mike's, okay?
Okay. September 15th, 1998, Arco Arena, Sacramento. Dark match for Heat, you and Mike Modest, as seen in Beyond the Mat. I would like to know your memories of that day and that match.
I truly mean this, other than when my children, my son and my daughter were born, that was probably the greatest day of my life. I remember going to the Arco Arena. I brought my mother with me because Barry was like, I want you to bring your mom. She's in the movie, and I like the whole concept, you walking with your mother, you're so much bigger than her. And this little lady with this, giant son, I like that whole dynamic. So, bring her. So I said, okay, no problem, and great for me because I love my mother, and, and she was always supportive, and I'd love her to be there. Right. So that worked out anyway. So, so I remember us going to the Arco Arena, getting to the venue, hanging out most of the day. I remember Mike and I having this little conversation, and Mike looking at me and he said, Tony, don't choke on me out there. And I said, brother, I won't choke. And he goes, yeah, I've had a match with, I'm not going to say the guy. I had a match with, and he kind of choked out there. And I don't want, it just didn't look good. I don't want you choking out there. And I go, brother, I'm not going to choke. I said, we've been doing this for a little while. And, I've wrestled in front of large crowds when I wrestled at San Francisco State, and that's real wrestling. And I said, I've had guys out there really trying to take my head off in front of crowds. So I said, I'll be okay. And he said, okay. And I remember him telling me, and this is a kind of like a behind the scenes moment, right? I remember in the movie, Mike drops me with this move. And I don't even know, they call it something. And Mike started calling it, Mike had a name for it, reality check or something. I can't remember what he called it, but it was, the move that he ends up beating me with and Beyond the Mat. Mike says, hey, Tony, I want to hit you with this move. And I want to say, he said he got it from Vinny Massaro. And, Vinny's doing a lot today. Vinny's been around. Vinny's done his thing. So I'm very proud of Vinny. Vinny kind of came in after I did. And Vinny was like this innovator of wrestling moves. He played a lot of video games. He watched a lot of Japanese videotapes and things like that. So he always would see these moves, and then he'd add some spins to them and, make them more advanced, right? So, so he got that move from Vinny, and he said, Tony, I'm going to hit you with this move. Now, if we land like I want us to land, then we're going to finish with that because people are going to go crazy. If people don't pop, then I'll hit you with the Death Valley Driver. I'll pick you up, hit you with the Death Valley Driver, and then we'll go home with that. And I said, okay, no problem. So I remember him picking me up for the reality check, and bless Mike's heart. If you guys ever go back and look at the video, and I thank Mike even to this day, and I'm going to say it right here on this videotape, when Mike is about to drop me on my head, because I'm so tall and Mike is shorter than me, I'm kind of draped over him, and my head is kind of head like almost straight to the mat. And you can see my head kind of like not really tucked. And you see Mike actually tuck my head. So he grabs my head, tucks my head, grabs it tight, and then he goes and he drops me, and it just looks fantastic. I mean, it looks like he kills me, but at the same time, he protected me, so that I'm able to walk away, right? Yeah. So he drops me right on my shoulder blades. As soon as he hooks my leg, the place goes crazy. I'd never heard a reaction like that. And Mike goes, "We're going home." As he hooks my leg, right? "We're going home." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, 1, 2, 3." And that was like the greatest moment in my life, other than my kids, right? Because I just remember doing it. I can't believe I just wrestled in the WWE. Now, forget about being in the locker room, talking to Stone Cold Steve Austin, Ken Shamrock, Dan Severn, forget about all that, which was great in itself. Just being in the ring in front of that crowd. And I just remember the ring being so damn stiff. I'm like, damn, our ring is pretty stiff, but this ring is stiff. So I had a whole new respect for all the WWE guys, because I was like, oh, these guys are just sissies. They're just making all the big money. We're working hard because we're the indie guys, and we're the ones bumping on hard rings. They got the soft ones. And it's like, no, it was nothing like that. The ring is hard. The ring is stiff. It's bigger than our ring. I just remember saying, oh, these guys, hey, much props to these guys, so yeah.
Wow. Well, Mike's side of the story was they were Bruce Pritchard wanted to cut you guys for time, but Mike was adamant, no, we're getting this amount of time. Bruce is yelling on the headset to the referee for you guys to go home very soon into the match. Mike tells the referee no, that you're going to wrestle for the allotted time that had been agreed upon, and that was kind of his side of the story. He kind of felt like they were trying to screw with you both to try and put this, I guess, make the story in the documentary of like these two guys had their opportunity and
blew it.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. I mean, I've seen interviews with Mike, right? I've seen an interview with Mike where he said that, and I'm not saying that didn't happen. I didn't have a conversation with Bruce Pritchard. I don't remember talking to. I mean, maybe I was just deer in the headlights, and I just don't remember a lot of things. I remember the whole thing where Jim Cornette spoke with us. I do remember in Beyond the Mat where Bruce Pritchard is sitting at Gorilla, Amadas, Jones, because it was time for us to go out, and I remember all that stuff, but I didn't have that conversation. Mike was the veteran, so Mike was the one leading the match. I have no shame in saying that straight up. Mike was the one leading the match, and I was just, Mike, take me through this, dude. Let's just get through this, and let's look like stars, So I do remember during the match hearing the referee saying a few times, okay, you guys got like 2 minutes, okay, you guys got like a minute and a half, you guys got like 30 seconds, and we got our stuff in. I don't know if Mike, I don't want to make it seem like, because it might kind of give off the impression that Mike was like, screw what you guys want, we're going to do what we want. And that kind of comes off a little rebellious, and it's like, who would want him back if you had that kind of attitude, right? So, because these guys are the ones paying for time, and we're the lead-in for Raw, right? So if we go too long, that means they can't go on Raw, and they're going to be pissed, right? So I don't think that's quite what really happened in such a sense. But I mean, Mike and I, we got our stuff in, so when they were running time on us, we were getting everything in. So I don't remember us rushing through anything. I don't remember us cutting anything out. So when Mike says, we stretched the time, I don't know, maybe we did, but I don't remember anybody being mad at us. I remember me hitting Mike with the belly to belly off the top. And when I hit him with you guys would have to go back and look at the match. And I have a very good copy of the match that I got from Barry Blaustein that I don't see anywhere. And Mike is always telling me, dude, you need to put that on YouTube and stuff. And I don't know why I'm just so selfish with it. So I'm just I'll put it up on YouTube. but I have a pretty good copy of our match from Beyond the Mat, right?
Cool.
And in the match, I hit Modest with a belly to belly off the top rope. And as soon as we land, the referee comes down and he's like, "You guys got 10 seconds." Okay. And if you watch, as soon as he says that, you see there's like no sell for Mike, who just got hit with a belly to belly suplex off the top rope, right? As soon as we land, you see, as soon as we land, the referee comes in and does that. And when he does that, Mike just gets up, and you see me turn around. I get up, I go for the power bomb, and Mike blocks it, lifts me up, tucks me, bam, drops me.
Yeah.
And we 1, 2, 3, and I think we ended it in 10 seconds. So,
right.
I do want to save Mike in the sense of, Mike was not this rebellious type of guy who was going to go and do what he wanted to do and go against the programs. Because, Mike did his stuff in wrestling. And I never heard of Mike having like a bad reputation or being some kind of like guy who, did his own thing. So I do want to make sure that, I don't think Mike meant it, because it kind of sounds like he didn't care what they thought. And he was, so if I'm wrong, Mike, you go out there and you correct me, brother. But yeah, I don't think we did anything wrong. I think we hit time just like we were supposed to. And when we went back in the locker room, I remember D'Lo Brown and Road Dogg and a lot of the guys coming up to us. "Oh, that was fantastic, guys." D'Lo Brown was like, "I'm going to steal that move. I'd never seen nothing like that before in my life." Yeah, so it was great. I thought we did fantastic, and like I said, we got all our stuff in. I don't remember us cutting out anything. So
right, yes. So I remember when the documentary was released, and me and my friends got to see it. As I said earlier in the introduction, I distinctly remember us watching that portion of the documentary about you and Mike, and always wondering, like, what happened to these guys? We don't have any way of, I don't think any of us had the internet at the time. We had no way of figuring out what went on. But after the release of the documentary, how did that exposure affect your career?
Well, first of all, when the movie was about to come out, they had like a world premiere down in Los Angeles. I remember Barry Blaustein invited me down there, and I was really surprised that Mike wasn't there, Roland wasn't there, and I don't know what was going on. How did I go and they didn't go, and why didn't we go together? And I don't know what the story. My girlfriend at the time, and I remember going down there, and we went to the premiere, and yeah, I had no APW representatives except for myself, and I do remember at the time, how come the guys aren't here, right? But anyway. I go to the world premiere. I remember getting there late because that was the thing about Tony Jones. I was always running late, and I got to the premiere late. So when I got there, there was security there, and they had the whole thing gated off, and they had a red carpet. And I was trying to get in, and when I was trying to get in, the security wouldn't let me in. And Barry Blaustein sees me, and he was like, "Hey, security, he's in the movie. Let him in." And security was like, "Oh, I'm sorry." And he opens the door. And when he opens the door, I'm about to walk through the door. And Barry's like, "No, Tony, do the whole thing. Walk the red carpet." And I was like, "Oh." So I was like, "Okay." So we went around, and we made a special effort, and we went around and walked the carpet. There's nobody around and everything, but just to do it, So we walked the red carpet and walked into the movie theater, and I sat down, and I remember sitting down next to Jake the Snake Roberts' daughter in the movie, right? Sitting next to her, she was really sweet, really nice. Terry Funk was in the first row, and a lot of people who were, producing the movie and all that kind of stuff. And I remember Barry announcing some of us in the audience. There was no New Jack, and there was no Jake Roberts, and a lot of guys weren't there. Like I said, no other APW guys. But I remember Barry saying, I want to recognize a few people in the audience. Jake the Snake Roberts' daughter, yay. We got Tony Jones, one of the indie guys. And I remember, yay. And I remember Terry Funk giving me a thumbs up. That was so cool. That was so cool because probably a year before that, when I very first was getting into pro wrestling, APW had a couple of guys get tryouts. I think Steve Rosano was one of them against JBL. And I remember that was my first time backstage seeing Shawn Michaels, all these guys, and I was like, "Oh wow, I can't believe I'm actually backstage." I mean, just like last year, I'm buying the pay-per-views and watching them on television, and now I'm backstage one of them, right? Yeah. And I just couldn't believe it. And I remember being backstage, and walking around with the guys and seeing Terry Funk, and it was, Terry Funk's like, "Hey, how's it going?" And I never would have thought like a year later, he and I will be doing a movie, being in the same movie together, So that was pretty cool. So, and how did Beyond the Mat really affect me? A lot of times people ask like, did you get a lot of money for Beyond the Mat and all that kind of stuff? And I have, no problem in saying, I didn't. Look, if other guys got paid, God bless them, but I didn't get paid anything for Beyond the Mat, and it was probably the best thing that I ever did for free in my life. And I tell people, a lot of times, you can do things and it's not always for money. I got more exposure out of Beyond the Mat than anything else. I became the Beyond the Mat guy. Mike and I kind of got locked in together with that. So it was like, whenever Mike would go someplace, "Hey, you still talk to Tony?" And whenever I do, you ever talk to, you still talk to Mike? And I told Mike, I said, "Brother, we're locked in forever now." And he was like, "Yeah, I know, because now we're the Beyond the Mat guys." So and I told him, I said, "Dude, I embrace that. I'm happy to be that." And Mike said, "Me too." So yeah, so it was the greatest thing for my career. I remember going to WWE after that Mike and my tryout, and I remember going back for other matches, seeing Vince McMahon and backstage, and Vince looks at me and he was like, "Hey, good seeing you again." And I'm like, dude, that would have never, I don't see him walking up to enhancement guys ever. Yeah. I mean, he looked at me and he was like, "Good seeing you again." I remember Bruce Pritchard seeing me and saying, "Hey, Tony, how you doing?" And that's all because of Beyond the Mat and nothing else, and I remember walking up to Paul Heyman, and I like, a little bit later in my career. And I said, "Paul," I said, "I just want to introduce myself." I said, "I've never really met you before." He goes, "I know who you are, Tony." And cool. And I was like, "Oh, yeah." I was like, "That's really," and like I said, that's all Beyond the Mat, So yeah, it was probably the greatest, best thing I'd ever done for free, And like I said, sometimes you don't get paid for something. I'm like, still do it. If it means exposure, if it means opportunity, take advantage of it. The money will come later. So.
Excellent. That's really cool. Thank you for all of that. Just some great information there. Moving forward, I noticed in my research, it said that you did some training at the WWF Dojo, training under Dr. Tom Pritchard in around November 1999. Can you tell me a little bit about that experience?
Yeah. I had sent some material, even though I'd, done the Beyond the Mat thing, you still have to kind of push yourself and promote yourself and just, "Hey, don't forget about me. I'm still working," stuff like that. I've gotten bigger, because in the movie, Jim Ross was like, "Hey, just fill out a little bit." And, everybody always comments about that, because I'm the guy in the movie that, "Hey, Tony, did you take it to mean, get on steroids," and, all that kind of stuff. When the movie was coming about, I wanted to get myself in really, really good shape. So what I started to do is I started to train really hard. I started to diet because I didn't want to go in there because movie, camera, I took film and I work with cameras. The camera makes you look bigger than you really are. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to look fat out there, right? I want to look like I belong. I want to look fit. I want to look like an athlete. So I worked out. I got myself in really, really good, like amateur wrestling shape. And turned out I got myself too small. So, right. I ended up going in there. I remember getting on the scale. I think I was like maybe 220, 225. And I remember getting on the scale in WWE. They had a scale off on the side near the locker rooms. And I remember I was in my gear and everything. And I was like, I wonder what I weigh. And I just got on the scale and I was like, this is my boots and everything. And I think I had I was like 225. And I remember feeling good. I'm like, yeah, I'm at real good, like competition weight, so I'm good. And yeah, I think when I look at myself on video and everything, I did look a little too skinny, So that's when Jim Ross was like, kind of fill out a little bit. And I was like, right, I think I did it backwards. I think instead of trying to put size on, I was taking size off. So yeah, that's my perspective of that, right? So when he did say that, I did take his advice and I did get bigger. I got much bigger. I think I got to about 275 pounds. I remember seeing Axel Rotten at an XPW show, and he looks at me and he was like, "Hey, you were the guy in that movie, huh?" And I said, yeah. And he goes, you were the one that Jim Ross said get bigger. And I said, yeah. Boy, you took his advice, didn't you? I said, yeah, I did. So, and then when I came back later and I saw Jim Ross, I said, excuse me, sir. I said, I met you a few years ago. I go, you and I are beyond the mat together. And he goes, oh yeah, I told you to get bigger, huh? And I said, yeah. He goes, yeah, good job. You're looking good. And I'm like, oh, thank you. He goes, now you're in the hunt. So he remembered what he because in the movie he was like, get a little bigger and then you'll be in the hunt. I think that's what he said to me or something. And when he saw me later, he was like, yeah, now you're in the hunt. I'm like, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So yeah, so it's funny when you look back on it.
Cool. So did that lead to this opportunity to do this training with the dojo and Dr. Tom?
Yeah, I kind of went off. You asked me that question. I didn't even answer you at all. Sorry about that.
That's okay. That was great.
So yeah, so I was in contact with Terry Taylor. I was sending promotion. That's what I was talking about. I kind of got off track. I was sending promotional videos in, and I got a phone call from Terry Taylor telling me, he was like, hey, this is Terry Taylor from World Wrestling Federation. I was like, oh my, I can't believe this. I used to watch Terry Taylor in, Mid-South and, the NWA and, and Red Rooster and, that whole thing, right? So I'm like, I can't believe Vince has like wrestlers, calling, the independent, I always thought it'd be like some, business guy or something, but, these are actual wrestlers, calling, so anyway, Terry Taylor was like, yeah, I saw your video. I like what I saw. I'd like to bring you to our camp and take a look at you. He goes, now, if I stand corrected, you came from APW. And I said, yeah. And he goes, so I'm going to send you to the training camp. You're familiar with the camp, right? I said, yeah, I think I know about it. He goes, your buddies went there, Crash and Vic. So he knew, he knew like the connection. Terry knew everything. Your buddies went there, Crash and Vic. And I said, right, yeah. And he goes, so I want to bring you in for that and take a look at you. And I said, okay. So they flew me into Connecticut. I remember feeling like such a big star. They flew me in. I came down the escalator and there was a guy holding up a sign that said Tony Jones. He goes, I have a car waiting for you. It was like so cool. I'm like, wow, I'm like a real wrestler doing this, right? So I check into the hotel and there's this guy named Sean Evans, who I don't really know what Sean did. I think he did a lot of indie stuff. I thought I saw him on Ring of Honor, but his name was Sean Evans. He'd done some stuff in the indies. And he was at the hotel with me. He said he got flown in as well. And so we come to the training facility, and this is the part that, everybody gets a kick out of. So we're at the training facility and Alpha Jr.'s son is there as well. And Dave Bautista is there, right? and Dave is so cool, right? And I'm talking to Dave because I'm from San Francisco, and he was like, oh, I used to bounce out there, and at this club, and I was like, I used to go to that club, and he was like, oh, okay, so we got along, and everything was cool, and they wanted Sean and I to put a match together, heel against baby, so we put together this little match, and we just kind of worked it in like a 12-minute match, and Dr. Tom Pritchett was like, that was good, and I remember walking over into another room and Dave Bautista comes over and he was like, that was good. And I was like, oh, thanks, brother. And, you never know at that, at these times, what these guys are going to turn into, right. And, at the time he looks at me and he was like, that was good, brother. And I'm like, oh, really? Thanks. And, we just kind of whipped it up real quick. He was like, yeah, no, but that was good. And I was like, thanks. And he was like, yeah, it's like, if they're expecting me to do stuff like that, dude, I'm not going to make it. And I was like, oh, I go, brother, you'll do fine, and dude, they put this, like the rocket on him, because that's when it was like a year later I saw him pop up in OVW as Leviathan. Yeah. And it was about a year later. Now a lot of people don't know this, and I'm happy to say this because I'll tell you about a backstage story, but I was John Cena's second pro match. They sent me down to UPW because WWE did, because they wanted to take a look at me, and UPW was developmental territory. So when they brought me down there, Rick Bassman told me that he wanted to put me in there with a guy named Prototype who'd only had a couple of matches, but WWE was real high on him. So, I just want to kind of say the story about John. From the moment John stepped in the ring, I mean, probably before he even stepped in the ring, WWE had their eye on him, so because when I wrestled him and it was his second pro match, Rick Bassman told me WWE likes him a lot. So, so yeah, John, they had their eye on John from the very beginning,
Wow.
So, yeah. But yeah, at the training facility, I trained with Batista, Sean Evans, Alpha Jr. That was under Dr. Tom Pritchard. It was a great training experience. At that point, I've been probably working about 3 years, and he just kind of showed us like, what WWE would expect out of us. I think that's kind of like what it was. It was like, let me see you guys work. And we worked, and he was like, they want to see it like this, and you got to do it like this, and this is how we do that. And it was more like showing us the WWE way. It's like, so it was kind of like that. He wasn't really training us or showing us how to do moves per se. It was just he would fine tune what we were doing and showing us how to do it their way. So it was great. I remember getting in there, locking up with Batista, and I'm 6'4", at the time, 275 pounds. And I remember locking up with Batista, and I just felt so small. I mean, he was just Batista at the time, was at least much bigger than he was when he went to WWE and all that. Because I think they asked him to get smaller because he was too big, But yeah, I mean, he was a monster. So you see star all over Dave Batista, from that moment. So yeah.
Definitely. That's some again, some more great stories. Thank you so much, Tony. Why is it that after you do this camp, did anyone ever explain to you why there was never an opportunity to maybe get signed to the company or be brought up to maybe possibly go on TV and be on the shows? Did you get any feedback about that?
No, not really. I was always, it was always like, you did great, everything, I never really had any negative feedback or anything. I did have one thing happen, which was kind of like a milestone in my career, which I think was probably responsible in a way for making me kind of slow down. And I can't remember how old I was, but I remember doing a WWE show, and Bruce Pritchard, and if I can ever talk to Bruce or send him a message, which I might do one day, and ask him why he did this, because I'm grateful for him for doing it, because I don't know why he did it. He said, "Hey, Tony, can I talk to you for a little bit?" And I said, "Yeah, no problem." And he takes me up into the stands, and he talks to me about this wrestling business. And he said, he was like, Tony, I've been watching wrestling since I was a kid, and I've been involved since I was like, teenager, and this and this, and it's changed so much. And at the time, of course, Benoit became this evil figure, but at the time, he was like one of the best wrestlers in the world, right? And he was like, Tony, Chris Benoit comes flying off the top rope with that flying headbutt. I mean, that damn thing hurts. I mean, when he lands, I mean, it's stiff. There's no work there. I think the guy's going to have like neck problems later, but I mean, it's stiff. And, people are just like, oh, okay, yeah. But, let this guy raise his eyebrow, and run the ropes and hit a real sloppy elbow. And they just go crazy, And it's just, the business has changed, it's being a good wrestler isn't it anymore, And it's just like, you're really solid, you're really sound, And it's like back in the 80s and the 90s, man, a guy like you could go anywhere. But now, how old are you? And I can't remember what I told him. I think I was like maybe 32, 31. I said, I'm like 32, something, whatever it was. And he was like, yeah, you're right there. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, Vince doesn't like anybody that he can't get at least 10, 15 years out of. I mean, he puts a lot into you. You're an investment. And if he can't get the return out of you for a good 10 or 15 years, then, he doesn't want to take the chance. He doesn't want to invest the money. You're right there. And I said, okay. And he goes, and you seem like a smart guy. What do you do? And I told him, I'm a computer guy. I work IT and everything. And he goes, and you make good money? And I said, yeah. And he goes, and you're at home with your family on the weekends? He goes, Tony, do that. And he goes, if I was you, I would do that. Stay out of this dead end business. He goes, the business is changing. The jobs aren't secure. When you leave pro wrestling, you don't really have much. And he goes, if you got something else to do, I go do it, man. And I said, wow. I said, okay, thank you. Now I continued to wrestle, and I continued to get matches after that with WWE. But I remember kind of feeling like, okay, I'm going to start slowing this down. And I do remember him when he told me that. I was grateful, and I didn't know why he did that, And it was just like, dude, I don't want you to waste your time, dude. It's like, if you got something else you can do and you can spend time with your family, because, I ended up losing my father, a couple of years later, and I was grateful that I was home, and, I had some other family tragedies. I ended up losing my daughter, who meant the world to me. And I'm glad that I was home for these moments, because I was able to be with them. I was able to hold their hand. So, if I was on the road, if I was wrestling, I wouldn't be able to live with that, that I was on the road in some hotel while, a loved one passed away or whatever, because you can't bring that back. Right. So, so the way things happen for me, I'm very grateful, because I started to slow down wrestling at a time right before my family probably needed me most. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So a lot of guys, and I've said this in other interviews and stuff, a lot of guys are kind of, even some of these veterans, they talk kind of bitter, a lot of time when they do these interviews, they're drunk or whatever they got going on. But, they're just like, Sunny, like what's going on with her right now. It's like sometimes this fall from grace thing, it's just, it's so sad. And I don't feel like that at all. I look back on it and I embrace it, and I'm happy for that time. And I don't, I did a match about 5 months ago, because a friend of mine did a wrestling show, and I got myself in really good shape, and I'm in really good shape now. I feel great. My weight's down. I'm like 245 pounds. I'm in really good shape, but I'm not getting in the ring. It's like, the time has passed. About 5 months ago, I did get in the ring. I remember standing in the ring. Kenny King was my tag team partner. Kenny King from Ring of Honor, super nice guy. I'd met him before. So we're in the ring with these other two guys that are just super nice guys. And I remember just being in the ring, and Kenny King is just, doing his spot with the other guy. And I just looked around and I was like, what am I doing here? What am I doing in the ring? And I was like, it's like, this is their time. I kind of feel like an old guy here, even though I'm in good shape. It's just not my time anymore, So, so for me, I embrace it. I'm happy with it all. I'm happy on the way I left. I'm happy for the way things happen. I have no bitter feelings. I don't feel like, oh man, if this would have happened, or, or I blew this, I don't feel like that at all. I don't feel like that at all. I feel, everything that happened, I feel like, it was a blessing, even the fights that I had, like with Roland. I mean, Roland fired me probably three or four different times, for doing other shows, for not following why'd you work this guy's show? I told you not to work his show. I'm going to have to fire you. I'm like, oh God, what am I going to do? And he's like, so he'd fire me, and I'm like, I don't care, Roland, go ahead and fire me. I'll go work for this guy. So then he'd bring me back a couple of months later, and at the time, I mean, it was I was so pissed off. I was so angry. I hated Roland. And you look back on it now, and it was fun, and, so I don't have any ill feelings. And, like I said, I look back on it with great fondness, and that's a little different for a lot of people, because, that doesn't sell when a guy says everything is cool, right? It's like when you say, this sucked and this sucked and this guy's an asshole and this and this, that's what's popular. But, all the boys that I interacted with, I can't sit there and say any of these guys were assholes, or, all these guys were respective. If anybody, got a little too familiar, or, got a little too stupid, you can pull them back a little bit. It was all brotherhood,
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's my perspective on it.
No, it's great, because I think at this point I've done about 125 interviews with different wrestlers, and there have been times where I've had to really try and get a guest on the show to just stop fixating on this one thing and blaming this for their career not being good, and for themselves thinking that they were a failure in wrestling. No, like, I really always try to build everyone up and try to get them away from the negativity and look at the positives. So it's always nice when I can interview somebody that does look at the positives and doesn't look back with any ill feelings toward it. So I want to ask.
My thing is, I didn't spend that much time in the business. I think my career. I mean, I did and I didn't. Like when how much wrestling did I really do? Where I was wrestling like every week, right? That was probably from '97 till about maybe 2002. 2001. And in that time, I mean, I worked a lot of matches and I worked in front of a lot of important people, so managed to get seen and, managed to get known off of that. But, I didn't spend a great deal of time, in the business, even though, like around 2002, something like that, I started to taper off a little bit, started to concentrate more on my job and stuff like that. And I do shows here and there, but, where I was really hitting it every week and it was like my life. That was probably about a 4-5 year period,
Right.
so I didn't give it my life, you know what I mean? Where a lot of these guys did, so we got to keep that in perspective. So, a lot of these guys are bitter because, I mean, I'd probably be bitter too, dude, if I put everything into this one thing and this one thing caused me to get a divorce. This one thing caused my kids not to like me. This one thing caused me not to be there for my parents when they died. Right. So, if that happened, maybe you would be bitter. So, I didn't let wrestling control me like that. It wasn't my life like that. So I'm not going to sit here and try to make it seem like I'm on the same level with a lot of these former WWE guys that have been on the road all through the 80s, away from their families. I mean, these guys were real hardcore, real pro wrestlers. What we later became, we were a softer version of what these guys did in the earlier time. They paved the way for us. So much props to them and respect to them. I don't want to disrespect when they say, stuff is they're bitter. Maybe you see these guys today making all this money and, you worked so hard and and you were over and promoters screwed you over and you were, racism was going, all kinds of stuff, you'd probably be bitter. So just got to give respect, in that sense.
Yeah. I wanted to bring up this because I didn't know about this until I did my deep research. February 2000, a tryout for World Championship Wrestling, I believe with Terry Taylor, Kevin Sullivan, and Mike Graham being there as well. Tell me about how this came about and what this experience was like.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Keep talking. Sounds like hear me fine.
Sorry, hang on a second. It's gone a little weird there.
Okay, so audio, but you can hear me. Everything's good.
Can I keep talking now?
Okay, I think it's clear now.
Oh yeah, it's cleared up now.
Okay. All right, good. All right, so what was your question again? Sorry, man.
So the tryout for World Championship Wrestling in February of 2000.
Yeah, that was okay. Tryout. I think you're talking about the one that I did, the closed tryout that I did up in Reno. A couple of things. So I was. This is all pushed by Terry Taylor again, because when Terry had, asked me to come to the training facility in Connecticut, and apparently I heard that went well. With when I trained with Dr. Tom Pritchard and everything. So apparently that went well. But then Terry got fired from WWE, which kind of killed my connection right there. So then Terry ended up popping up in WCW. So then he contacted me and said, "Hey, I'm over here now. Let me bring you in over here."
Yeah.
So, it was really like, it's really like who kind of a thing, right? So, and that, that was Mike's connection too. Terry knew Mike and Terry likes Mike. So, Mike got a lot of opportunities through Terry as well. So Terry set me up to go to the power plant. So I went to the power plant first. So I'm not sure if that's what you're talking about in the tryout sense, because in a way they sent me to the power plant for a tryout. And then I also did what's considered a closed tryout. Terry Taylor told me to fly myself to Reno, Nevada, which was like a 45-minute flight from San Francisco. He said, "Fly yourself to Reno, Nevada, and we're going to give you a closed tryout." And I said, "What is that?" And he said, "We're going to put you in front of like our trainers, in front of some of the wrestlers who are executives, and we're just going to, put you through some drills." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I flew myself to Reno. They reimbursed me for it and everything, paid me as if I was working a show. And then I worked in front of, it was like Ric Flair, Sid Vicious, Scott Steiner. I think Mike Graham was there, like Doug Dillinger. Some other guys were there. Terry wasn't there. He was like, "Tony, I have to do other things." And so he had to leave. But I remember Sid Vicious really being there, just really, talking to me as like, Tony, you're a big guy, and you got to do it like this, and this is what I do. And I mean, I was honestly surprised and shocked, pleasantly surprised to see how articulate he really was. I later found out more about Sid when I saw his shoot interviews and things like that, right? But you see this big, gigantic, monster-looking dude, Sid Vicious, and he's always screaming and yelling and all this kind of stuff. But I mean, the guy is very articulate, very smart, very patient. Took time, just critiquing me, right? Telling me how to do things from a big man perspective, because it was like they were all spending time. Ric Flair talking to me, Scott Steiner talking to me, about the amateur part. He knew I'd wrestled amateur, so that went great. I remember Tank Abbott from the UFC being out there watching me. So I had a couple of what you would call, I guess, tryouts with WCW. The Power Plant, that was a rough scene. In that training camp, they had. I'm just gonna start. I don't know if you have a question about this, but I'm just gonna bring this up anyway.
Sure.
At the Power Plant, I remember it being like, and excuse me for saying this. Can I use a cuss word?
Yes.
It was bullshit. Okay. That's what the Power Plant was. One of the guys in my camp was Adam Pearce. Okay, who's doing fantastic things in WWE right now. But he was in the camp. There's this other guy named Rashi Brown. I think those two were friends. And we went to the camp, and basically what they wanted to do is just break us, right? So they put us in there, and they had some of the guys shoot on Adam. And Adam's not an amateur, Adam, and I'm sure Adam will tell anybody this. I mean, he's got to be real. He's got to be honest. He's not an amateur wrestler, right? And if he is an amateur wrestler, he's not like college level or anything like that, right? And they put him in there with not Sean Stasiak, who's a great guy. Sean Stasiak, excuse me for saying that, because I ended up wrestling Sean Stasiak in college, and I beat him in a college match. And we talked about it years later, when Sean was wrestling in WWE. But so I slipped by saying Sean Stasiak, but it's the other one in WCW. I think he teamed with him. They were all part of the same team. I can't remember his name. He went to WWE, big guy, Sean. He did MMA.
Chuck Palumbo.
Yes. Sean O'Hare.
Sean O'Hare, right. Sean O'Hare.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sean O'Hare got in there and, I mean, just like roughed up one of the guys. This other guy, Reno, these guys did some stuff with WCW. He got in there, roughed up one of the guys. And then I remember I got in there, and who was it that I got in? Was it Reno? I think Reno and I got in there. And Reno tried to pummel me, just upper body, like Greco, right?
Yeah.
And Reno tried to pummel me. And, I've been wrestling. I wrestled this guy named Matt Blevin, who I love dearly. And this guy was, Division II national champion and, Greco national champion. And I dare you to try to throw me, because this guy is the best. And I trained under him for 5 years. And, and I remember Reno trying to pummel me, and he couldn't pummel me. And I remember pushing Reno back, and somebody saying, "Hey, Sarge, this kid knows what he's doing." And when they said that, Sarge goes, "Jones, get out of the ring and give me laps." And I was like, "Okay, you can't break me in the ring, so you're going to break me by doing laps. Fine." And I remember running with such pride. I'm like, "Thank you, coach. Thank you, coach. These guys couldn't break me in the ring." So the next day, Adam told me, "Yeah, we're going to go home." And he goes, they're not going to do this to us. They're not going to beat us up like this. This is nonsense. It's not what we came for. This is, we're real wrestlers, and this is nonsense. So they left. So I stuck around, and I remember Terry Taylor came on the last day. And the only reason I stuck around was just because I had the amateur wrestling background. I was, if they wanted to go, I'll go with them,
Yeah.
And I remember Terry Taylor coming on the last day, and Terry was like, "Tony, where'd the other guys go?" And I said, they left, I said, it was kind of rough, and he said, "Why are you still here?" And I said, "Well, because, I wrestled amateur." And I said, I can take this, but these guys didn't have the background, And Terry, I remember going over to Sarge and said, these guys are, real wrestlers. They're independent wrestlers. They're not guys off the street. And Terry really defended us, even though the guys weren't there. He defended Adam. He defended Rashi and myself when I was standing right there. Eric Bischoff was there. I don't know if he heard any of it. He was on a cell phone call. But Eric Bischoff was in the gym, and he ripped into Sarge, and Paul
Wow.
Orndorff is standing there. Yeah, and he says, these guys are independent wrestlers. The reason they're here is because I'm trying to take a look at them. They've all had tryouts with WWE. No, he didn't say WWE. He goes, they've all had tryouts up in New York. And, and if we don't want to take them, I'm sure they might take them. So you can't be doing this to guys that I send down here. And, and I remember Sarge looking at Terry, and he was such like a drill sergeant on us and just like, come on, right? And when Terry was like, you can't be doing this, he was like, oh, we didn't do anything. It wasn't that hard. And it was, and I remember it was like, okay, look at the, and I remember Sarge looking at me, it wasn't right. It wasn't that hard, right? And I was like, it was fine. It was fine. And that's when I was like, this all this right here is for the birds. You know what I mean? I'm like, so that was my power plant experience. One of the guys, I think it's Kiwi. I think he does a podcast. I'm telling him right now, if he sees this, I told him to put me on his show because he was in the power plant. I'm like, dude, bring me on your show. I'd like to talk about the power plant. Let's talk about it. And he never got back to me. So if he hears me, put me on your show, dude, because I want to talk about the power plant and some of the experiences. Some guys, Sonny Siaki was there, Mike Sanders was there, Elix Skipper was there, Sean O'Hare was there. I can drop names. So, so I told him, I said, let's just, not to nail anybody or talk bad about nobody, but, let's have this interesting conversation. So, I do want to talk about the power plant because, like I said, I had done all this amateur wrestling and everything. And I thought that was just a nonsense way of kind of treating the guys, bullying the guys. Right. So yeah, that was, the stuff that you hear about the power plant and it all being a bunch of muscle heads and, bullies and all that. It was pretty much true. So.
Right. Awesome stuff. And yeah, I think Alan is taking a little bit of a break with his podcast at the moment from what I've heard.
Yeah. Alan Funk, right?
Yeah.
That's it. That's his name. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You know who I'm talking about. Yeah. So I told him I want to be on his show. Now, no disrespect to Alan because he was cool when I was at the power plant. He was one of the cool ones, but I just told him, I said, dude, I was at the power plant, and I said, and you were there too. So, bring me on your podcast and let's talk about, when we met. So,
that would be cool.
When he does do his show, I'd like to have a friendly chat with him. So it's all good.
Cool. Not too many more questions to go, Tony. Thank you so much for your time. I really wanted to ask you about XPW and your experience there and maybe why you didn't stick around for a more prolonged amount of time with them. I know you worked a little bit with Tracy Smothers there, also Pogo the Clown. Tell me a little bit about how, you about your experience there with XPW and maybe why you didn't, stick around to do more shots with them.
I got the perfect answer. So at the time I was trying to get a lot of dates in, right? And Roland, I was, the whole thing with Beyond the Mat had already come out. And I think Barry had told me, Tony, you have a lot of talent, you have a good look, and I've talked about you to other people and they said they'd book you, I think you should try to go out there and get yourself booked outside of APW, and that's what Barry told me. And I thank Barry to this day for that. That was great because I didn't have anybody else, helping me in that area. Right. So Barry said, go out there and get booked. Right. So I was calling promoters to try to get booked. Right. And I had already been booked for Rick Bassman because WWE said they wanted to take some more looks at me. So go down and get booked for Rick Bassman. So I got booked for Rick. When I got booked for Rick, I'm like, hey, I'm going to be in LA. I wonder what else is going on in LA. So I found out like a couple of days before the UPW shows, XPW was running shows. So I looked them up on the internet, which was kind of new at the time. And I looked them up on the internet and I found, I think it was Kevin Kleinrock's number. And called Kevin. So my name's Tony Jones. And he was, oh, I've heard of you from APW. And I said, yeah. And I said, I'd like to come down and get, do a match and like this and this. And I said, the only thing is, I said, I'm, I'm kind of being looked at by WWE. I said, I don't want to come in there and do any garbage stuff. I said, I'm a wrestler. I said, I want to get in there and I want to work with someone. And Kevin was like, yeah, no problem, Tony. We got guys that can work here too. And I said, okay, cool. Give me one of them. And he said, okay, no problem. So I got myself booked for XPW and UPW. So it was like over like a 5-day span, right? So I remember telling Rick, he's like, oh yeah, Rick, I got some XPW dates booked as well. And Rick was like, oh yeah, we really don't like them. And I said, oh, and he said, yeah, it's kind of like, it's this competition thing, and they've done this to us, and we don't like them, they don't like us. So, Tony, you're not really one of my guys, so I'll let this slide. But in the future, I'd like you to pick a side. Right. He goes, I really don't want you to, I really don't want you to, I can't have you going between both. So he did let me work both. So that's how I ended up coming in and doing those shots, right? So when I came in, I remember I was in the locker room and Abdul the Butcher is sitting there. And Abdul the Butcher looks at me and he was like, "You working tonight, kid?" I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Who you working?" And he goes, "I don't know yet." And he was like, "Oh, do you juice?" And I didn't know what he meant by that, right? Because I'm still kind of new to the business. He's like, "Do you juice?" It's like, that could mean like, do you take steroids? Do you bleed? I don't know what he meant by that, right? So he said, "Do you juice?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Do you bleed?" And I said, no, I don't bleed. No? I said, no. I kind of want to see you bleed tonight. And I said, "Oh, really?" I don't see that happening, brother. And I never in my life thought that I would be talking to Abdul. But, I used to watch this guy when I was a kid. I was scared. So I'm in the locker room and he's like, "Yeah, I don't see that happening, brother." And he goes, "No." And I said, "No." And Rob Black comes walking in. He goes, "There you are." He goes, "Tony." He goes, "I got you tonight working against Tracy Smothers. I got you tomorrow night working against Tracy Smothers. And then on the third night, I got your buddy, Pogo the Clown. That is your buddy, right?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Okay, so that's your 3 shows." And I said, "Okay, cool. Now, Tony, did I take care of you?" And I said, "Yes, you did, Rob." And he said, "Okay, good." And then Abdullah's like, "Hey, Rob, what's up with this kid? He said he doesn't bleed." And Rob looks at Abdullah and he goes, "Tony? Nah, Tony's like an amateur wrestler. He's a real wrestler. Tony doesn't do all that." And he walked out, and then Abdullah goes, "Hmm." And I was like, "Thank you, Rob." So I hear all this bad stuff about Rob and what Rob did and all this kind of stuff. And I'm not saying Rob didn't do anything. I don't know what he did or didn't do, right? But Rob was nothing but respectful to me. He's starting to run some XPW shows again. And I reached out to him. I was like, "Hey, Rob, do you remember me?" And he was like, "Shooter Tony Jones. Of course I remember you," and yada yada yada. And this is like, a couple months ago. Yeah. And Rob was nothing but nice to me. I mean, he put me in an angle with him. I was like, it was like the Black Army, I think. Yeah. Where Tracy was part of the Black Army. So, the whole thing was like, who are you? "Oh, I know who you are. You're that guy from Beyond the Mat." It's like, okay. Yeah, you didn't get that match. You didn't get that tryout with the WWE. So you're here now. Well, we're going to kick your ass. And, so it was like that whole storyline, letting everybody know, okay, we know who you are, so it was, he put me over, so Rob took care of me. Like I said, I know there's some bad stuff out there about him. Like I said, I'm not saying he did or didn't do it, but he was cool to me. Kevin Kleinrock was cool to me. So I had a good time in XPW. And the reason I left was because I had to pick a side. And when I saw what was going on in UPW and WWE had told me to go down there. And when I did work down there, I had Bruce Pritchard coming up to me. And, a couple of shows later, Triple H is coming to the show. And, Jim Ross is coming to the show. It didn't take a genius to know, which side you should pick. Yeah, absolutely. So I easily, you had John Cena, you had Samoa Joe, Frankie Kazarian, you had all these guys, at the time, who, we were all just indie guys, so these guys went on to do things, but that's the kind of like the crew we had down there. So you didn't have to think too hard, which side you wanted to pick. XPW was great, and, they had some really good workers, but I mean, I think UPW, being looked at by WWE was on a different level.
Right. Interesting stuff. And it is such an interesting period of time in the pro wrestling business at that point in time. When we're talking about the year 2000 going into 2001, obviously ECW, WCW, unfortunately go out of business, close their doors, get bought by the WWE. And yeah, as you're talking about all these guys, Joe, Adam Pearce, Kazarian, Christopher Daniels, they're only just getting started, and now, they're on television today. So interesting time in the business. I know on the 21st of May, 2001, you worked with Raven in San Jose for an edition of WWF Jacked. tell me a little bit about that, and also your perspective on how things may have changed. I guess all the independent guys, now that two of the three major promotions are now out of business.
Yeah, that to me that was kind of like in a way that was kind of like the end of the business to me. That was kind of like the end to me. That was the end of the wrestling business, and that was the beginning of sports entertainment. Now I know Vince was still doing sports entertainment, during the Attitude Era and all that kind of stuff. But because you had ECW and you had WCW, and they still kind of did a lot of wrestling and all that kind of stuff, it was still like wrestling, right? But now Vince is the deciding factor, right? Vince is the man, right? There is no WCW. He owns it all. ECW is pretty much gone. ECW is almost swallowed by WWE. So now it's Vince. So now everything Vince says, that's what wrestling is. So if Vince says wrestling is sports entertainment now, that's what it is. Whereas before, he can say it's sports entertainment, but that's just his company. Now you got WCW, if they want to say we wrestle, right? Remember that was like their motto? It was like, WCW, we wrestle. That was like in the 90s, and where the big boys play, and that whole thing, right? Because it was like WWE was kind of talking about sports entertainment and being light. And other like ECW, WCW, they were more like, we're wrestlers, we're hard hitting, we're tougher, right? Yeah. So when WWE bought out WCW, to me, that was the end of the wrestling business. The wrestling business as we knew it was over. Now it's sports entertainment, and now we're getting into now wrestling is becoming something else. So as far as I was concerned, that's kind of like when I started to stop wrestling, because now I'm like, okay, if you don't get a job with WWE, you're not getting a job. Now you're just going to bounce around on the indies. Whereas before, you can go to ECW, you can go to WCW, you can go to WWE. There are places to go. And if you go to WWE and it doesn't work out for you there, you can go to WCW, so there was just places to move, right? But when Vince became the deciding factor, if you're not getting a job in WWE, you're not getting a job at all. So, I think that kind of took the wind out of the sails, for a lot of us during that time, because it was only, it was a few years later when TNA resurfaced, right? Yeah. A few years later, right? When TNA resurfaced, and now WWE had some sort of competition. Right. Today, of course, we got AEW, and things are different now, right? But at that time, it was like Vince had just swallowed up the wrestling business, and there was nothing else around. So to me, it was a very depressing time in the business.
Definitely, because the WWE roster now takes in some guys from ECW, WCW, trying to even get in there in the door now at that point, because their roster had been bloated and all that. There's nowhere else to get make a living by getting a contract with. It's taken near 20 years for the business to finally start to recover a little bit from that. Now there are options for people to actually do it for a living, which is nice.
To answer your question, though, so I got the gig because I was always in contact with WWE whenever they come out, locally to the San Jose area and stuff like that. I'd always reach out to them and find out if I could get matches in and stuff like that. So this was one of the opportunities when they were like, "Hey, we're coming to San Jose. Would you be available?" So when I went to the show, they told me I was going to work Raven. Now, funny backstory on that was that I was sick with pneumonia.
Shit.
On that day, right? And I went to work that day. Because I was going to do like a half day, work until about 10, 11, and then I was going to leave, go to San Jose, and get to the show, because I had to get to the show I think by 12. So that was my plan. Well, the night before, I got really, really, really sick, and I went to the emergency room, and they told me I had walking pneumonia. So I ended up going home. The next morning, I got up, I went to work, because I was like, I gotta go, because I'm gonna have to tough my way through this, right? So when I go to work, I'm in the parking lot about to go into the building, and I'm like, dude, I feel so bad. So I go inside, I make a phone call, I set up an appointment, I go to the emergency room at Kaiser. And this is the morning of that Raven match, and I go to the doctor, and I'm like, is there anything you can do for me? He goes, no, you have walking pneumonia. You really need to be at home in bed. And I said, yeah, I got to wrestle in the WWF tonight. Oh. And he says, yeah, no, you have walking pneumonia. You're not wrestling in the WWF tonight. I said, no, I'm wrestling in the WWF tonight. I said, this thing doesn't come every day. And, I said, I'll crawl down to the ring if I have to. I said, but I'm wrestling in the WWF. Now, is there anything you can do to help me? And I got to look at my records and see what they did. But he told me, he said, and I thank you for this, Doc, that he said, there's a shot I can give you that will reduce your symptoms for a few hours. But after your symptoms are reduced, they're going to come back and you're going to be really sick. And I said, okay, if you can just get me through the match, I'll do it. And I remember him giving me a shot. It hurt. Within an hour, I started feeling a lot better. I was driving to San Jose and I started feeling better. I'm like, okay, this is good, right? The congestion went away, the funny stomach pains and everything went away. I was feeling a lot better. So I go to the show, I get dressed up, Raven and I go for our match, everything is good. I walk to the ring, I'm in the ring. All of a sudden, Raven's music hits. When Raven's music hits, I start feeling hot. And I'm like, ooh, what is that? Am I nervous? And all of a sudden my stomach just starts to spin. And I start saying, oh my God, I'm starting to feel like I'm about to throw up. And I start feeling sick all of a sudden, right? So now Raven gets in the ring and the match is about to start, right? And I remember thinking, okay, I'll know how I am when I take my first bump. So the match happens and then I forget what happens, but I took a bump and I was like, okay, I didn't throw up, I'm okay. But yes, in that match, I had pneumonia and I was sick as a dog. And I got through the match and I went in the back and I wanted to go throw up because I didn't feel good. I felt so sick. And I remember Raven calling me over here, hey brother, come over here for a second. I was like, oh shit, I feel like sick. I got to go throw up, but I'm not going to walk away from Raven. He, that's so disrespectful. Yeah, yes. So I walk over to him and he's talking to me about, yeah, that was good. Do this and wear that and something more flashy and, make yourself stand out, and you got a good body and maybe something a little bit more low cut or something, you got to do this and you got to do that. And I thank him for that because, he was really, they say Raven had a great mind for the business and that he should be an agent and all this kind of stuff. And yes, he should, because he took me aside and, was talking to me and I thought that was really cool. And I remember sitting there listening to him and really being appreciative to it. And he said, okay. I said, yeah, okay. And he said, all right, kid. And he walks away. And when he walks away, I went right to the bathroom and I threw up. So, so yeah, on that match, I was sick as a dog. But yeah, I think it looked good.
Awesome, bro. I want to also bring up, and correct me again if I'm wrong, at the Arco Arena, 31st of August 2004, I believe you teamed with somebody in a dark match against the Basham brothers. Is that correct?
I always forget about that. That was, I think I teamed with Jason Styles. Jason Styles worked for Big Time Wrestling. I've known him a lot of years, really cool guy, good friend of mine. The owner of Big Time Wrestling here in the Bay Area was Kurt White. Kurt White was really plugged in with like Bret Hart and a lot of WWE guys. He would do like autograph signings, things like that, bring a lot of guys in. He was a good, whatever he said he'd pay you, and he paid well. He was a respectful guy. He was a good guy. He passed away recently. Jason Styles was one of his guys, one of his top guys. So Jason and I tagged against the Basham brothers. I think the best thing probably that Jason did was, I think Jason is responsible for training Bailey in WWE. Yeah. So I knew that he had trained Bailey, but I think I saw a documentary with her where she gives props, and I think he's in the documentary too, I think. But yeah, it was Jason and I who we teamed against. We teamed to go against the Basham brothers, who they were super cool. That was for I think it was a lead in for SmackDown. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. For Velocity. Yep.
Velocity. Yeah.
Just a couple more questions about these different dark matches or matches on Heat, etc. 26th of February 2007. So this is a few years later. You worked with Eugene on Heat at Fresno State.
Just died on me. Hold on. Technical difficulties. Give me a second. All right. Looks like I lost video, but I'm here. Okay, there we are. See, I'm prepared. There we go. Back in business. Bro. All right, let's go on.
Cool, bro. 26th of February 2007 is a few years after this Basham brothers match. You worked with Eugene on Heat at Fresno State University. Do you have any?
Is that where it was?
Apparently, the internet can be wrong.
Okay. Fresno State University. I don't know if that's where it was. I want to say it was somewhere else. But anyway, yeah, that was great. That was my first time actually doing a comedy match.
Right.
That was really cool because at the time Eugene was doing the like mentally challenged guy gimmick, right?
Yeah.
And which he did fantastically. It was amazing how he did that. But yeah, so I had to kind of work my gimmick, which was a shooter gimmick, around that gimmick, which was kind of awkward. And he was just such a professional, and he was. He goes, yeah, we're gonna work today. And I said, yeah. I said, brother, I said, whatever you want to do, man. I said, I'll be there for you. And he goes, oh yeah, I know you've been around. I've seen some of your stuff. And I said, oh really? And he goes, yeah, but dude, we're just gonna keep it so simple. We're gonna do a little bit of comedy, because that's what they want to see. So we're just gonna do some comedy. I'm gonna do this and this and this, and just get your stuff in, and we'll just do this and this and this. And he was so cool to work with. He's an indie guy too,
Yeah.
So Nick Dinsmore. Yeah. So yeah, he's super cool, and so we went out there, we had a great match. And what I remember most about that match, which I'm just so grateful for, is that they really put me over. If you ever watch the match, which I have a really good copy of that match too. I don't know if it's out there on the YouTube, but I do have some of my matches that I do want to start putting up on YouTube. But in that match, they keep saying like, Tony Jones grabbing Eugene and whipping him off, Tony Jones doing this and this. And I remember just Tony Jones. It wasn't like, they kept saying my name, and I kept getting an offense in. I hit a clothesline. I had a chin lock. I body slammed him. My leg dropped him. I did a lot of, I got a lot of stuff in, right? And they just kept saying like Tony Jones. And I think even at one point, they even were like, this Tony Jones is not a bad looking guy. You know what he looks like? He looks like a skinnier version of Jonathan Coachman. And I remember Jonathan Coachman was like, hey, there's only one coach. Now, come on now. Some guys, they can't have the bald head, but Tony Jones, just like myself, we can take the bald head and run with it. So, all this is on the air, you know what I mean? So, so I'm just like, they're just putting me over. So that was just fantastic. And I remember Roland said, Tony, I saw that match you had. He goes, they really kind of put you over there. They kept announcing your name. And I said, yeah. So that was my takeaway from the whole thing. That was, for me, I can retire right there. I'm done. I got my name on television a bunch of times in WWE. The announcers announced me. I'm done. So that was probably one of my favorite moments, was that match with Eugene, just because of how we kind of went back and forth, and they announced me as if I was like one of the guys on the roster.
Yeah, that's really cool. Usually when it's a match like that, they might mention the guy's name once, but the fact that Jones, they'll say Jones, or or Tony, or whatever, or this kid, or or whatever. But it's like, no, they were Tony Jones. I mean, they must have said my name probably 20 times. Yeah. Excellent. Another one I wanted to bring up, we're getting very, very close to the end here, Tony, but the 23rd of July, 2007 at the Arco Arena again, this time against Snitsky. How did that one go?
That went well. That was really just a straight squash.
Right.
And at the time, Snitsky was getting ready for John Cena. And I remember Vince McMahon coming up to Snitsky, and Vince just looking at it. I'm sitting there going over my match with him, right? And Vince comes over, he looks at me, and he kind of tips his head at me like, "Hey," and I was like, "Oh, hey, how you doing, sir?" And he was like, "Looking good, Gene." And Gene's sitting there, "Thank you, sir." Just big as a house, And when McMahon walks away, and he was like, "I know, I've seen you. I've seen you on the indies and stuff. I know you've been around and everything, but they really want me to squash you. They want me to get ready for John, and they want me to squash you. So I'm sorry, brother." I'm like, "Brother, it's totally okay. It's like, I'm here for you, dude." I said, whatever you want, But I remember Gene being so cool, like it was like almost like it was like hurting his feelings that he had to like squash me, So I was like, nah, dude, it's okay. That's what I'm here for, It's like, I'm happy to be here, right? So yeah, so that match was pretty much just a squash, but it was great because, you know, I remember Gene going out there and, you know, working in the main event against John for one of the upcoming next shows. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. You know, I helped get him there, you know, him beating me and squashing me. I guess the fact of me being bigger, you know, and him, because what he did was Randy Orton came up to me afterwards, and Randy Orton walks over to me and he was like, hey, you had a good match there. And I thought he was like making fun of me, right? Because I had heard Randy is kind of sarcastic and things like that. So he was like, hey, you had a good match there. And I was like, really? It was nothing, brother. And he goes, nah, man, it was good. And I said, nah, it was really nothing, brother. And he goes, look, they wanted you to put him over, right? You put him over. When he grabbed you and he yanked you to your feet, I saw you kind of jump up a little bit. So he was like, he looked like a killer. You did good, man. I was like, thank you, brother. And he was like, Randy Orton, as if I didn't know who he was, right? And he was like, you know, he's like, Randy Orton. And I'm like, you know, Tony Jones, nice to meet you. So he walked away. And that's when I felt like, okay, you know, I did good because, you know, Randy Orton took some time to tell me that, you know, he thought I did good because he was like, no, you know, they wanted you to, are you still?
Yeah, still there.
Okay. I thought I lost you for a second. So no, when Randy said, you know, they wanted you to put him over, and you put him over. You did good. And I guess so. When you look at it like that, yeah. You know, I said, thank you. But yeah, Randy Orton told me I did good. And that's when I felt like I did good. But otherwise, it was just a squash.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
You'd already talked about kind of slowing down with wrestling after the, that conversation with Bruce. You're still working a little bit, but you're mostly focused on your actual job and your family and all that stuff. And you wrestle here and there, which is awesome. You told me earlier about when APW went to the Cow Palace and you worked a couple of shows there. And I also noticed that you worked in 2017, but then you also said that you wrestled 5 months ago. Wanted to know,
right?
I want to know if is there going to be any more Tony Jones matches in the future, or do you feel like you've sailed off into the sunset as far as wrestling is concerned?
I'd like to say that I sailed off into the sunset, and I am happy to do so. I'm in really good shape right now, and I swear, I could get in the ring right now if I wanted to. And that's a good feeling. And that's why I'm not going to wrestle, is because I feel good and I feel like I can get in there. And the fact that I stopped now means I stopped on my own terms. I didn't stop because I had an injury. I didn't stop because I was too old. You know, I didn't stop because my body broke down, right? I stopped when I was still able to do this just because I wanted to. And, you know, that's a good way to stop. You know, so I'm good with embracing it. You know, I felt like even though I was in good shape and everything, you know, and I felt great. I just felt like it just wasn't my time anymore. You know, and it's like, you know, I I've always been like a fan of, like, you know, professional boxing, right? I love boxing. I love like MMA, even more so than like pro wrestling, right? And I've always been like the biggest fan of boxing and stuff. And I always thought it was so sad to see these guys that were just so fantastic in their prime, and they just hung on too long, right? And it was like, you know, Sugar Ray Leonard, you know, how he looked at the end of his career, right? Muhammad Ali, how he looked at the end of his career. You know, a lot of these guys, Mike Tyson, how he looked at the end of his career. A lot of these guys they start doing it for the money because now they're fighting off their reputation. And I just remember, you know, not like I'll be fighting off my reputation, but what we're doing is we're holding on to that glory, right? And I was always like, no, dude, that's so pathetic. You know, it's like, you know, if you're doing, this is my perspective on it, right? If you're doing that, that means you haven't found anything else in life that gave you any sort of gratification that can take the place of that, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like with growth, right, and maturity, right, you need to be able to kind of say, okay, I'm past that. I'm doing this now. But when you don't have this now, you're always holding on to that. You see what I mean? And so I've always tried to make it like, you know, I got to find something else. It's like whatever it was that I put all my energy into pro wrestling, I got to find something else and put my energy into that will take me into my upper years, right? So no, I don't think I'll ever wrestle again. And I don't want to wrestle again. Mike and I kind of joke around and kid around about, maybe we should do a match together and, stuff like that. But, I don't, it would have to be totally for the right reason. And we'd have to both want to do it. But I don't see it, like I said, I did it 5 months ago and the feeling wasn't there no more. And everything, all the stars and everything were lined up perfectly. And it just didn't feel right. So I'm good with walking away from it. Yeah. I had a great time, great memories. I mean, you're doing an interview with me based on what I've done. Right. So I'm totally happy with what I've done, what I've accomplished, and yeah, I don't need to do it no more. And and like I said, I'm in really good shape. I'm really healthy. I have no injuries. I've gone through my entire life with no breaks, no serious injuries. I mean, I played football at high levels. I did amateur wrestling at high levels. I did pro wrestling at a high level, and I've never been hurt. I'm like, dude, an injury is waiting for me. Keep doing this, and you're gonna get hurt. So I'm going to stop while I'm ahead. Now, if I fall down the stairs or, get into a car accident, that's different, but it's not going to be in the ring. So.
Yeah, good stuff, bro. And that's great to hear, bro. And I guess this is now bringing us toward the end of the interview, which brings me to my final segment of the show. 5-second frenzy is what it's called, Tony. You don't have to get the answer within 5 seconds. I shouldn't have called it that because it just puts unnecessary pressure on my guests. But
we already messed up because now I'm thinking it's 5 seconds. But go ahead.
Yeah, quick fire questions for quick fire answers. First one, Tony. Who's your favorite professional wrestler?
Ric Flair.
Excellent. Do you have anybody that you would say is your favorite opponent that you had over the years?
I'd say Modest. Because of what we've done together, and after we did Beyond the Mat together, it was just so much fun because people wanted to see us together. So I'd say Modest, yeah.
Cool.
I had some good matches with Vic. I had some good matches with Vic Grimes too, but I'd put Modest as number one. Yes.
Excellent. If you could pick one match from your whole wrestling career that's the most special one for you, what would you pick?
The match in Beyond the Mat, because it was shot for the movie. Mike and I were being followed around with cameras in the WWE. So, all these, Ahmed Johnson, and all these guys are sitting there and looking at these two independent wrestlers like, who the hell are these guys and why are the cameras following them? We're the stars. So, so to have that kind of privilege, yes, that was the great, and to wrestle in the WWF in front of my mother, that was the greatest moment of my life. Yes, in my wrestling career.
Excellent, bro. Getting away from wrestling now, do you have a favorite book?
Do I have a favorite book? I'm ashamed to say that I don't read as much as I should. I read a lot. Well, not no more because they're kind of passe. But of course, I read a lot of magazines and newspapers and things like that. But I'm ashamed to say that I haven't read a lot of books. I did read the book Jaws, right? Because that is my favorite movie. And the reason I read that from cover to cover was because I heard that the Jaws book was different than the movie. And I'm like, are you serious? So if I read this book, it's going to be something different, because I'm like, why would you read the book if you already know how it's going to turn out? Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, the book is totally different. And I'm like, oh, so I read that book cover to cover, no problem. Right. But, I have a short attention span. I'm a video guy. I'm a video game, music, television, movie kind of guy. So, I like things to kind of keep moving, and it's just sitting there looking at words on a page. I just kind of fall asleep. So, I can read, I'm educated, but I just don't, I just don't read books that often.
No, I can understand. I'm kind of the same way as well. I really need more stimulus to keep myself going. And nothing against reading books. I love reading books, but I know where you're coming from there. So I guess favorite film has been covered now, but do you have a favorite TV show?
I have a lot of favorite TV shows. I grew up in the 70s, 80s, right? That's kind of like my 90s too, right? But I'm a 70s and 80s kid. So all my movies, my music, my TV shows, it's like everything I like is always during that those decades, right? I just don't like the stuff today as much, the TV shows as much, the comedy to me isn't as funny. It's so sensitive today, and just just the way things are today, right?
Yeah.
And they do a lot of good movies today, films that are being made today. There's a lot of good films being made today, but I think when you talk about the Jaws and the Godfather and some of these Scarface and some of these movies are just total classics that will never die. Right.
Yeah.
I don't know if, these movies today are made with glitz and glamour, and they don't have the same meat and substance as some of these older films. So I don't know. I like Three's Company. I love Sanford and Son. I love, Good Times. I love like Gilligan's Island. And, I go from like the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. So, take your pick. And I love all those Brady Bunch. I mean, all these shows. I love all those TV shows.
Yeah, all classics. Favorite musical artist or band?
Michael Jackson. Love Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson, number one. I'd say probably, even though I've only liked maybe 2 of his albums, as far as who I've just liked over longevity and what I've liked, probably Prince is number 2, and probably Tupac Shakur number 3. Yeah, so kind of a weird top 3, huh? Michael Jackson, Prince, and Tupac.
No, I think that's
which one doesn't belong.
I think that's a great choice, all 3 of them. Getting away from the arts now, only a few more to go here, Tony. Favorite food?
Ooh, favorite food. I like meat and potatoes. I'm a steak guy. I love filet mignon. If you would ask me a few years ago, I would have probably said spaghetti is my favorite, but I'll go with a good filet mignon. I went to Martha's Vineyard for my birthday because, like I said, I love Jaws. So for my birthday, my 50th birthday last year, I went to Martha's Vineyard, is where they shot Jaws, the island and everything. So I went out there and had the greatest filet mignon I'd ever had in my life.
Awesome.
So I'm gonna say filet mignon is my favorite dish if I had to, pick my favorite. Yes.
Excellent. When you were traveling in the wrestling business, did you have a favorite place to eat on the road?
No, we just kind of ate wherever we stopped, and that was a different thing about me too. It's like I didn't really do a lot of traveling with the guys. A lot of times, I always had a girlfriend, right? So a lot of times it was an opportunity from me and my girl to, hey, you want to go do something for the weekend? Let's go down to LA and I'm going to do this show and you can hang out. So a lot of times, the guys would all jump into somebody's truck or van or whatever, and they would do the road trip and do the guy bonding and all that stuff, right? But I always had I always had like a nice car, and I'd just be like, oh, I'll take my Mustang down to LA and I'll bring my girl. And so that was always my thing. So I didn't really, so we always did stuff different than a lot of the boys. And I took a lot of heat for that too, because we're like, oh, look at Tony, he doesn't want to be one of the boys. And I remember Roland made me the APW champion. And he was like, Tony, it's like, now that you're the champion, you're gonna have to kind of hang out more, this whole thing where, when the show's over, you go home and, so you need to kind of hang out, you got to represent APW and you got to represent, you're one of the boys now. So you're just going to have to hang out more. I was like, okay, Roland, then take the belt off me. And he was like, I don't want to take the belt off you. I want you to just hang out more with the boys. And I said, I don't want to hang out with the boys. I said, I want to go home after the show. Because my thing was like, when the show was over, right? I was like, I want to go get something to eat, go home. Maybe there's some boxing on or something else going on, because I got my life that I got to live, and these guys, they want to go to a bar, they want to go do the pro wrestler thing. And I'm just like, I got other plans. So I caught a lot of heat for that, for not always hanging out with the guys after the shows and all that kind of stuff. And I remember Roland telling me, years later when he was sick, he said, Tony, I used to give you a lot of heat about that because you didn't hang out with the boys. But, looking back on it, you were probably smarter than all of us, because what you did was that you would leave and you would go home to your family and you would be with the people that mattered most, while we all sat around talking shit about people, drinking, and just doing whatever. He said, you were doing the substance while we were just bullshitting.
Yeah.
So, that meant a lot to me when he told me that years later. He was sick, and I think he was calling people to kind of like, make peace and just,
Right.
So I remember having, that's why I was like, Roland, I'm in a really good place with Roland. I went to his funeral, and I got nothing but, I say, God bless Roland. And I probably as far as I mean, I talked to a couple of guys who are like, Roland, I hate Roland. He's this, he's that, and he's dead, but who cares? And some guys really don't like him. And I don't have that perspective. My thing is that he gave me an opportunity to live my dream. And without him, I don't think I would have ever did pro wrestling. And, did he do things wrong? Yes. Did he make me mad? Yes. Could he have been better? Yes. Could we have all done better? Yeah, we probably all could have done things differently. But, when I look back on it, Roland did more good for me than bad. So, yeah. So like I said, everything for me is positive. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like you need that in order to kind of, move on in life, right? Because you get stuck in that place too if you start talking about, oh, this sucked and this sucked and this sucked. You're giving all that power to that.
Yeah.
And I just don't have that. I don't have that. I talked to some of the guys and they talk that way. And, they didn't get a chance to do WWE. They always wanted to do WWE. They never got that chance and they're pissed. It's like, I got a chance to do everything I wanted to do. So I'm grateful. So, and I walked away with no injuries. So can't get any better than that.
Yep. Very cool, bro. I only have 3 more to go here on this segment. Favorite alcoholic beverage, or if you don't drink, just your favorite beverage in general.
When I was in pro wrestling, Steve Rosano introduced me to Irish peppermint schnapps, 100 proof, and I used to drink that. And when I wrestled in Japan, the owner of the company would give me shots of sake, and I would say, "Yeah, I drink peppermint schnapps." He's like, "You got to bring that next time," and I'm like, "Yeah." So peppermint schnapps was my drink in pro wrestling. Then I got into vodka. Now I'm kind of like doing Hennessy a little bit.
Very cool, very cool, very classy. Second last one here, Tony. It's the naughtiest one. It's favorite female body part. You see a good-looking lady. Where did Tony Jones's eyes go to first?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Favorite body part? What about a good-looking lady?
A favorite female body part. Yeah. What's your favorite?
You said something about it. Oh, okay. Favorite. I don't. Dude. I don't know. It all comes together, brother. It's got. I like the breasts. I like the hips. I like the butt. I like thighs. But dude, it all goes together, brother. You can't really have you can't have the butt without the thighs. Now you can. But to me, that's when you start doing the plastic surgeries and all that, and it doesn't look right to me, right? When a woman has plastic surgery on her boobs and her boobs don't look, they look too perfect and all this kind of stuff, it's just not a turn on to me. I've talked to guys who totally like it. They're like, dude, I'm totally into it. I like it. I'm just not into it. I'm into real. I like naturalness, right? And for me, if a woman has a nice butt, she's gonna have the hips. She's going to have the thighs because it's all together. It's all part of the genetics, Of
course.
And, so it's almost like, I don't really have a favorite part per se, because once you put the butt in perspective, now the hips look nicer and then the thighs look nicer. And then, so it kind of, I love a beautiful woman. And I think it's just, when you look at them, it's like art. You know what I'm saying?
I agree.
You know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to be difficult with the question.
No.
I just can't really say that there's one particular, because some girls have great breasts and then some girls have great, behinds. And I can't sit there and say, well, I like her breasts better than I like your butt. It's like, no, she can have a better butt than your breasts. So I can't really, you know what I'm saying? So I can't really say like, sorry, dude, I can't answer that one.
That's totally fine. I get what you're saying. If there's a nice butt, usually whatever that's connected to is probably going to be quite nice as well, etc. I understand.
Yeah, like I said, I've seen it. I mean, like say I'm a breast man, right? What does that mean? That I'm not going to like her butt more than your breasts because your breast, I'm a breast man and you have breasts, therefore I must like you more.
Yeah,
you see what I mean? It's like, no, this girl over here, could be hotter, because she has a nice butt. So yeah, so that's the perspective. That's a different answer than you probably ever got, right?
You're correct on that one, sir. And the last one for this segment is favorite curse word.
Maybe shit. I think I use that the most. Like, where's my shit? Or shit, or something like, I use it for a lot of different, emotions. So I would say that's probably, damn, but not as, I don't think it's my, I think shit. I think that's my favorite cuss word. I think I use it the most. Yeah. Of all the cuss words.
Excellent choice, bro. Well, Tony Jones, I just want to thank you so much for your time on the show with me. I know it's gone a little while now, but I've had so much fun. That time has flown by. I just want to let you know that I'm really, as a fan, I'm really proud of what you've accomplished in the wrestling business. And I like to always let everyone that I interview know this, is that, all the way over here in the most isolated city in the world, Perth, Western Australia, you had a fan here. So I think it's meaningful to know that you reached so far across the planet. And it was great to connect.
Dude, you don't know what that means, for real. Seriously. And I talked to Modest about this, and Modest told me you were a super nice guy, which is why I agreed to do the interview. I'm sorry I wasn't ignoring you. But a lot of times, like on Facebook, you get messages all the time, right? And when Mike told me, that you had interviewed him, I was like, oh, I'm sorry, dude. Let me get back to you. So my apologies for being, for taking as long as it did.
Okay.
And I appreciate you bringing me on and caring enough about what we did, to want to interview us, right? So when you say, oh, you reached somebody out here, I'm grateful that you even care to interview us, dude. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me. I haven't even heard all of Mike's podcast, so I heard a little bit of it, but I want to listen to the whole thing. But I hope we got some good substance out of this interview today.
Absolutely, Bryce. It was really great for me to learn about your time in the business, learn about your journey. And this is what the most meaningful thing is for me, is to let someone out there know how much that they, appreciated for, all the hard work that they put in their time in the business.
Thank you, man. Thank you so much, dude.